What's up, everyone? Welcome to the video. We're here breaking down week 20 of the NFL season for DraftKings and FanDuel. We got the divisional round on tap. 4 really good games, 8 teams left. Obviously, we're in the playoffs, so it's the best of the best, and we have tons of good options to talk about. So no shortage of good plays this week. It's just going to be a matter of finding which good play is better than the other good plays, which we'll try to break down as we go through this. But anyway, if this is your first time here, what's up? My name is Pennell. I break down NASCAR and NFL DFS each and every single week on this channel. And what I like to do in these videos specifically is go position by position with the player pool that I have interest in as of right now, which keep in mind that can change based off of personal preference or just injury news and things like that. We'll build a lineup as progress through it, more so for a single entry tournament build. Then at the end, I run my optimizer to see who's popping the most as of right now with the current projections and ownership projections that I currently have set in place. And hey, if that sounds fine and dandy to you, it can be one small thing in return. That's leaving a like on the video, subscribing to the channel if you are new, and feel free to leave a comment down below saying whatever you want to say. Be nice, be mean, I don't really care either way, but I'd be happy to hear from you. And as always, we will start with the quarterback position. I do have to mention, if you want access to the sheets, projections, optimizer, ownership, Discord community, all that fun stuff, link down below in the description or the pinned comment. I do cover other sports as well, including the NBA, NASCAR, and MLB, which we have NASCAR starting very soon, which I am extremely excited about. 2 weeks. 2 weeks until the clash, so a lot to look forward to. Anyway, let's talk some QBs here. Obviously, lots of good options. Like I mentioned earlier, we're in the playoffs. We're in the divisional round. It's pretty much the best of the best at this point, excluding some teams that didn't make the cut. But we'll start up top with the man, the MVP, Patrick Mahomes, 8,000 flat on DK, $9,200 over on FanDuel. The most expensive quarterback on both sites, but deservedly so. They have the highest implied team total. He's the best quarterback in football. Fantasy quarterback-wise, you can make a debate between him, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, but football-wise, he is definitely the man. And yeah, hard to argue against a 30.5 implied team total. Pretty soft matchup versus the Jacksonville Jaguars defense. They don't offer typically too much resistance defensively versus quarterbacks. The 30th DVA versus the pass, 25th versus the position. Do you guys need me to read the stats? He's good at football. I mean, play him. He's probably going to achieve that 300-yard bonus. He's probably going to throw 2 to 3 touchdowns. So yeah, fire up Patrick Mahomes. He's my favorite quarterback on the slate. Cash games, tournaments, you name it, he will be my highest owned QB. Then we got Josh Allen, $7,800, who's another fine option, only $200 less. He does offer more rushing upside, so people might flock to him just because of that, because of the safety net that he offers you. Around 50 rushing yards per game, about 270 passing yards. Not quite the passer that Patrick Mahomes is, but definitely has the upside. He's just not as consistent through the years I think Patrick is. And did have some turnover issues last week versus Miami. Almost blew that game. A couple of them weren't really his fault. Ball goes right through the wide receiver's hands. Stuff counts against Josh Allen, but nothing you can really do against it. But a couple of fumbles that have a fumble 6, I believe. And yeah, they cut it close versus the Dolphins with Skylar Thompson at quarterback. So that does concern me for my best ball teams that do have quite a bit of bills. But I think they should get the job done here versus the Bengals. They do come in as 4.5-point favorites at home. Bengals do have some offensive line issues, which we'll talk about with Joe Burrow. But both those teams almost lost the backup quarterback, so they have their own concerns there. But I don't really have anything against Josh Allen here. It's just for $200 I can get Mahomes, which I feel a little bit better about. And the matchup's a lot better for Mahomes as well. They do have a higher implied team total, and the Bengals are allowing the third fewest points per game to the quarterback position. So yeah, I still like Allen. I'll be doing Bill stacks, but comparing him to Mahomes, he's just slightly below that. Then we have Jalen Hurts at $7,600. So he played in the last week of the regular season, got the week off, which I'm sure is going to be a big help for him, but he did not look that great. And I did play a decent amount of Hurts that week, and it didn't really work out too much. It definitely hurt to play him. But the second highest implied team total on the slate here at 28 for the Philadelphia Eagles, 7.5-point favorites at home versus the New York Football Giants. And while he doesn't offer you the same kind of passing upside as Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes, he can do a lot of damage on the ground, nearly 50 rushing yards per game and close to 1 rushing touchdown as well. In the matchup versus the Giants, kind of mid-pack fantasy-wise, but they're 22nd DVA versus the pass, and not a very good run defense, which is kind of Jalen Hurts' main thing. That's why we play Hurts. Whatever he does through the air, that's icing on the cake. But what he can do on the ground is always going to be super important because he always has that upside for 100 rushing yards and multiple rushing touchdowns. So you're kind of getting 2 players in one there, quarterback and a running back. So I don't mind Hurts, but he is probably going to be... It's really a toss-up between him and Josh Allen. I could see going either way. Hurts is a little bit less expensive, and I would say the matchup's a bit easier. But I would say they're a tier below Mahomes for me on this slate, but not that far off, as you're going to see in the projections. And honestly, the projections might end up liking Hurts a little bit more because he's cheaper and has that rushing upside. I'm just talking from personal preference. And then getting into some of the cheaper options here, we have Joe Burrow at $6,500. They almost lost to the Ravens, which was really concerning, and now they're on the road in Buffalo. Tough place to play. 22-point implied team total, which is kind of low given the slate and low for the Bengals in general. And I think it's really because of the offensive line issues we saw for Joe Burrow. Because whenever he has offensive line issues, it can always be a bit of a challenge. And we saw that a couple of guys were out, another injury as well. It's just at $6,500, that is nice value, and you have great weapons in Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, so I don't mind going with some cheaper stacks there because of all the receiving options on this slate are below 8K, so it's not that hard to do. But it's definitely a teardrop here. I would honestly might prefer going with Trevor Lawrence at $6,000. I think everyone's going to be enamored with Mahomes in this game, rightfully so. But you can get some really nice cheap jack stacks here at 6K, and you get the receiving options that are cheap as well with Lawrence. And I know they only have a 22-point implied team total, but it's the same with the Bengals, and these guys are a little bit cheaper, and they're also 8.5-point dogs on the road, so they should have thrown the ball quite a bit. And we saw what they can do as dogs. They can put up some pretty big fantasy days. We saw that versus the Los Angeles Chargers when they ended up winning that game. Christian Kirk played well, Evan Engram did well, Zay Jones did well, pretty much just about everybody. So I don't think this is a bad spot for Trevor Lawrence at all in tournaments. I don't think I'd go there in cash games, but they're going to be playing catch-up, and the Chiefs are allowing the 4th most points per game to the quarterback position and 20th DVA versus the pass. So this is kind of just a game script play here, but I like the price point. All right, so moving over to our lineup, lots of options to pick from here, but I'm just going to go with my favorite, Patrick Mahomes, and I know he's the most expensive, but as you can see, the skill position player is not that expensive. I mean, we have CMC at 8K, we have all the wide receivers below 8K, and then Travis Kelsey is also below 8K. So we should be able to make this fit because there's plenty of some cheap value plays that I think will work out. And moving on to the running backs here, just trying to short the list. There's plenty of other guys that are playable, like Saquon Barkley. I got no problem with that, but I just wanted to try to slim it down a little bit so we're not talking about everybody on the slate. So start up top with the man, CMC, 8K flat, 92 on FanDuel. It's a tougher matchup here versus Dallas. The 49ers had a great matchup versus Seattle in week 1 of the playoffs. A bit of a tougher spot here. Dallas looked great versus Tampa, although I'd say this is definitely a tougher test for Dallas than Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Because I think the 49ers make the Super Bowl. I think they're the best team in the NFC. But when Dallas is on their game, they can be right up there with them. But I just think consistency-wise, it's going to be the 49ers more often than not. But Dallas is allowing the 3rd fewest points per game in the running back position. They're also 5th DVA versus the run, so I wouldn't say this is a dream matchup for CMC. But if you're looking for one of the best fantasy football players in the league who gets plenty of volume through the air and on the ground, I don't think it's a bad price point for him, but he's not a complete must-play for me like he was on the wild card slate. And then we have Travis Etienne at $6,400. Just continues to be really cheap. This was the case in the regular season, and it seems to be the case in the playoffs. And the Jaguars come in as 8.5-point dogs here on the road, so it's not the greatest game script for Etienne, but it wasn't a great game script versus the Chargers either. Before the game, it looked fine. They're only 2.5-point dogs, but they were still trailing by like 27 points, and he still put up a pretty good day on the ground. Didn't get into the end zone, so it wasn't a great fantasy day, and didn't really do too much with the air either. But if he can just find the end zone at $6,400, you have to assume the yards are going to be there. I believe his prop is around 75 to 80 yards. So if he can do that, add in a couple of catches, and we get a decent chance for a touchdown, I don't think it's a bad play at all versus the Chiefs defense, because Etienne's a pretty darn good back. And he's been very efficient with his touches, over 5 yards per carry this season. Then we'll kind of group the two Chiefs running backs together, Jerick McKinnon, Isaiah Pacheco. We know what they are. They play completely different roles. McKinnon's not going to be the guy that's racking up carries. I'm probably going to get just 3 to 6 carries maybe from McKinnon, but for the most part, it's going to be Isaiah Pacheco, or Pacheco, whatever it is. Pacheco sounds way more fun for me, but either way, I don't really care. One just happens to be a little bit cheaper than the other, and Pacheco does not really get too much usage through the air at all. That's McKinnon's role, which I say this every single time on the slate, that McKinnon just can't keep scoring a touchdown or two every single week, but that's just what he does. I know he didn't have a great game versus the Raiders, but he still scored the first touchdown of the game and still got him his 6 points. I think he ended the game by like 8 or 9. It wasn't a great day. Pacheco did have a good game, got into the end zone after a pretty long run near the end of the game after sucking for a while. Both guys look good on paper. Pacheco, 8.5-point favorite at home, 30.5 implied team total. I'd say there's a decent chance he falls into the end zone. I think I have him around 10 to 12 points in his projection. That's factoring the touchdown chance. So I don't think he's a bad play, $5,500. Just know McKinnon's going to be a lot more used in the passing game, which does give him a decent floor. And I think I do have him projected higher overall. And there was some rumblings that Clyde Edwards-Helaire was going to return this week, but we just got an update about 30 minutes ago that Andy Reid said he's probably not going to activate him for this game. So thankfully, we don't have to worry about that because that could just muddy the waters even more. Although, even when he does come back, I still assume he's going to be the third string guy. And then we have Miles Sanders here at $5,700, who I think is going to pick up some ownership. it doesn't feel great. I don't love playing Miles Sanders. It just doesn't really do too much of the passing game, and they'll use plenty of running backs. Kenneth Gainwell, Boston Scott, who always seems to have good games versus the New York Giants, but he does come in as a 7.5-point favorite, 28-point implied team total at home. Very similar play to Pacheco in my opinion. So, I mean, just two of the running backs that don't see much work in the passing game on the two highest implied team total offenses on the slate. So very similar plays, although Sanders on the year, getting over 15 carries per game, 75 rushing yards. You just kind of have to hope for a rushing touchdown, which he has done more often than not, over half a rushing touchdown per game, nearly 5 yards per carry. It just feels like every time I play Sanders, it doesn't work out. So if I don't play him, ask me, I'll let you know, and he'll probably go off. And moving back over to our lineup. So in this build, I know I'm playing Travis Kelsey, so I can't really spend down at tight end, which means I might not be able to afford CMC because there's some other good wide receivers I'd like to at least try to get in my lineup. So we're going to forego CMC. Not saying he's a bad play, safe play, but we're going to save some money here. So we're actually going to plug in Jerick McKinnon just because he correlates well with Patrick Mahomes. Feels gross. Feels like I'm just chasing the points and touchdowns he gets every week. But, I mean, he's RB1, RB2 on the best offense in football. So it makes sense that he scores a lot of points. And then we're going to plug in Miles Sanders as well. As gross as that feels, but the thing is, I'm probably not going to get any Eagles exposure in this build, and they do have a high implied team total, so it's just a cheap way to get it. And by playing Sanders, I'm kind of assuming he steals some Hurts goal line touchdowns, which would be well for this since I don't have Jalen Hurts. So I think it makes sense going this route. And moving on to our pass catchers, let's try to keep this as simple as possible. Correlate your wide receivers with your quarterback, stack them up, find the run back options with those stacks. So what games are you looking to target the most? Do not waste your time getting on one-on-one matchups. Maybe a very small slight edge you can find, but overall I feel like it's just a waste of time because most of the time elite wide receivers are going to win their matchups versus elite corners. Now sometimes if a guy like Sauce Gardner's on the slate, yeah, I'll try to avoid them, but we don't have to worry about that here. So up top we have Jamar Chase. If you were using Joe Burrow, you basically have to use either one of or both of Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. You could also throw in Tyler Boyd. And, you know, the tight ends can count too as stacking options, but specifically talking wide receivers here. But Jamar Chase, do like the price point. He's certainly one of the top options on the slate. And if you want to one off him, I am fine with that because you can't completely stack your entire lineup. Stephon Diggs, basically the same play as Jamar Chase. It really just depends on what side of the game you prefer. I think Jamar Chase is in a bit of a better spot here, and I do prefer him over Stephon Diggs, but you're really just splitting hairs there. It all comes down to what quarterback you have. Because if you have Josh Allen, I'm prioritizing Stephon Diggs over making sure I can get Jamar Chase as a run back because I can just run back with T. Higgins in that case. But if I have Burrow, prioritizing Chase over Diggs in that situation because I can run it back with Gabe Davis if I don't have the funds for Diggs, if that makes sense. If I have Jalen Hurts, I need AJ Brown. I need Devonta Smith. You can play one of them. You can play both. I am fine with either. Both guys are pretty much getting all the passing work besides Dallas Goedert. And then if you were stacking Patrick Mahomes, his wide receiver group is pretty weak. So that's where I'm probably going to have a lot of Jaguars as run back options there. Yes, Juju's fine. MVS is fine. Tony, he can be very hit or miss. Mecole Hardman has not yet practiced this week, so it sounds like he's not going to give it a go this weekend, but that's something to keep an eye on. But excluding those guys, they're all fine. The Chiefs have like 14 wide receiver 2s and 3s that they throw out there, and they happen to produce. Justin Watson as well, who caught a 70-yard bomb versus the Raiders last couple Saturdays ago. But Christian Kirk is a run back option, 6K. I like that a lot. The Chiefs have not been good versus the wide receiver position this season. Let me pull up their stats here just so you guys have something better to look at while I talk. But yeah, like Christian Kirk a lot. I like Zay Jones. He gets very similar targets to Christian Kirk, but he's always like $1,000 or some dollars cheaper. So that's why I always flock to Zay Jones because he's got some really nice upside. The floor might be a little bit lower, but I like the ceiling, especially for tournaments. You also have Marvin Jones down there at only $3,600 for a cheap guy. He does get a decent amount of volume, just about 5 targets per game, and certainly has some big play upside. Gabe Davis, throw him right in there with Stephon Diggs. It seems like always in the playoffs, he always does well. In the regular season, doesn't do too much besides a couple of bombs. But whenever the playoffs turn on, he just happens to be there. So at $4,800, I do like him. He's certainly going to have some ownership. I think that just about covers it. So just to keep it simple, quarterbacks, receivers, pair them up because on a small slate like this, you're going to want at least 2 pairing options with your quarterback. All right, so moving back over to our lineup, I want to get one of his wide receivers in. I don't really care which one it is. If we have to drop some guy at the end to make something fit, I have no problem doing that. But we'll plug in Juju for now. He hasn't done anything in a while. He did have a nice 2-game stretch where he had like 20-some targets, but it's been ugly ever since. And we'll need some run back options here. Christian Kirk obviously looks like a fantastic play, but also Zay Jones at $4,700. I like that a lot as well, and it saves us some cash. So we're going to roll with Zay Jones, lead the wide receiver 3 spot blank for now, and we'll move on to tight ends. Defense always the most fun part. And anyway, speaking about tight ends, we have the one and only up top, Travis Kelsey, far and away the best tight end in football, $7,700, and far and away the best tight end play on this slate. And since I'm playing Patrick Mahomes, I'm basically having to lock in Travis Kelsey. But I do want to mention one thing. If you guys are playing over on PrizePicks, or if you're brand new, check out PrizePicks.com. The link down below in the description. Use promo code CPEN. And you can get deposit match bonus up to $100. No strings attached. It's free money. Use that to your advantage. And they usually always have some decent promos going on. But his fantasy point prop is at 17 for this weekend, which seems a bit low for me. I know you're kind of banking on a touchdown a little bit, but I believe I have him at 22 points. Don't mind the formatting on this. Looks kind of ugly when you import from Excel to Google Sheets, but that's what I prefer doing these videos on. But yeah, I have him at 10.5 targets, 7.5 catches, 22 fantasy points. So that's a decent amount of leverage there, 5 points higher. So don't have to completely follow me there, but I did think that was a pretty soft line to take advantage of, and I do like that quite a bit. So I do like Kelsey there, and obviously for DFS purposes, the best tight end play. Goddard, if you're using Jalen Hurts, use him. If you are using Patrick Mahomes or Trevor Lawrence, works with Evan Ingram as well. And I don't mind going double tight end with those two because Ingram has basically wide receiver upside in that offense. And Hayden Hurst, if you need a pump play, you can use him as a one-off, or if you're using Joe Burrow, he makes sense as a cheap pairing option. Then as for the defenses, I hate breaking these guys down because it's kind of worthless. Some guys just get a lucky touchdown. Some guys give up nearly 40 points and still end up being the optimal defense. I'm talking to you, Miami Dolphins. So just it's kind of a crapshoot here, but the Bills are going to be the ones that project the best, given their price point at $2,900. And if they can get the Joe Burrow with some offensive line issues, I don't mind that 22-point implied team total, which is tied for the second lowest on the slate. And to finish this lineup off, we're going to plug in Travis Kelsey here since we have Patrick Mahomes. We kind of already talked about that 12 times already. I don't mind going double tight end with Evan Ingram. I've been doing that on the small slates. If it's a main slate, I never really do that, but the small ones are fine. Ingram, you kind of get wide receiver upside with him anyway. So it leaves us with 2 spots left, just over $4,200. The Bills defense was the one that kind of standed out to me, but I mean, you can also play any of these guys and I'd be fine with it. Probably just not the Jags. Everybody else, I think, somewhat in play. And that leaves us $5,600 left for our last wide receiver spot, which we're just missing out on a couple guys I like. I wish we had Christian Kirk money, but that doesn't seem to be the case here. Obviously, if we moved a couple of things around, I'm sure we can make it work, but I just don't really want to. So we have Ayuk, Hodgins, Gabe Davis. Davis would be the one that stands out the most to me there at $4,800. I just think he's a bit underpriced. And that would leave us with $800 left, which that's fine on a small slate. But if you wanted to make some changes, you could upgrade Juju. You could upgrade a guy like Miles Sanders. I'm not sure exactly what that would leave us left with. But if you wanted to get a Joe Mixon in there instead, or a Travis Etienne, you do have the power to do that. But I don't think it's a bad looking lineup. But they'll just copy and paste this. I built it on the fly just to try to see what fits. No guarantee I end up playing it. Please use your own judgment and build your own lineups. And like I said in the beginning, just want to run the optimizer here to see who's popping the most as of right now. If you want to access this to build your own lineups, links down below in the description or the pinned comment. But I had this building as we were talking through it, so let's see what was popping here. And I don't always agree with this, so I just want to see if my opinions will back up the projections sometimes. So it looks like a really like CMC there, popping in each and every single build, which kind of surprising, but not at the same time. It's not just because he's CMC at that price point. I get it. For cash games, I totally do, but for tournaments, I can understand maybe getting away from him a little bit. Evan Ingram popping a lot. Zay Jones, I thought those were 2 easy plug-in plays for the most part. Jalen Hurts being the most popular quarterback is kind of interesting. I know it's probably just baking in all that rushing upside, the high total, good matchup versus the Giants. So I understand that. That's one of those things where I'm probably going to not agree with the projections all the way because I do prefer Mahomes the most there, and I think him and Josh Allen are a bit of a top toss-up. But it does look like Mahomes is coming in as my second highest quarterback at only 20%, and just really not too surprised at who's popping there. It's a lot more Darius Slayton than I was expecting, but for the most part, I can definitely make cases for why these guys are, but you're not always going to agree. And if you are someone that does about 150 or 20 max, you have to make sure you have your settings put in place, your exposures capped, because I would not play 100% of a CMC or 91% of an Ingram. So that's one of those things you have to play around with and get what you want. But with that being said, that's all I got for you guys this week. I hope you did enjoy, and if you did, make sure you like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet done so. I wish you all the best of luck, and I'll see you all next time.